a very warm welcome to Kavyalap Vaishishtya session. Kavyalap is organized by National Institute of Advanced Studies Consciousness Studies program, and it is a platform for all of us poetry lovers to come together and discuss poetry in its various facets and nuances. So today we have amongst us Dr. Sankita Menon, who is our guiding light in all our NIA CSP programs. And along with that, we have Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, who is the chief coordinator of this program. Dr. Shankar Rajaraman is a postdoctoral fellow at NIAS, and he is a doctor by profession and has a PhD in Sanskrit poetry. So he's our very own in-house Sanskrit scholar and poet. So we welcome you, sir. And along with this team, we are Preet Kona and Meera Kumar, myself. We both are PhD scholars at NIAS CSP. So we are very, very happy to have all of you here today to love and share the joy of poetry. So this is a Kavyalab Vaishishtya session. So within Kavyalab, we have two kinds of sessions planned. One is Kavyalab Vaivitya, which is for all of us poets among and within ourselves to come and share our poetry, poems we like and poems we write. So that is a platform for all our fellow poets to share our poetry. And then we have Kavyalab Vaishishtya, which is for specific established poets to come and talk to us more about their own forms of poetry and all of that. So today we have an excellent speaker who will be talking to us about Prakrit poetry, which is, I would think, a lesser known language, which is definitely something that we should all know about, and it's a fascinating subject. So I would request Preet Kona, my friend and coordinator, to speak more about the speaker today.
Thank you, Meera. Shankar sir, if you could please introduce the speaker to us today. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Meera, for introducing the coordinators and the platform itself, Kavyalab. Today's speaker is Suhas Mahesh. I have known Suhas personally for several years now, and he has matured into one of the finest Sanskrit poets I am aware of, contemporary poets. Both in idea and diction, he is very close to the traditional Sanskrit idiom. He has several Sanskrit and Prakrit verses on the tip of his tongue, and as far as I know, he has a very good grasp of both Greek and Latin languages, which are Greek and Latin to me actually. Currently, he is doing his PhD in condensed matter physics from the University of Oxford under the supervision of Professor Henry Snaith. He is funded by a Rhodes Scholarship. He graduated magna cum laude in physics from IISc Bangalore. He has been a research intern at the Italian Institute of Technology Milan and the University of Groningen, Netherlands. He has several publications to his credit, and his presentations were adjudged as the best in the Indo-UK Solar Conference Pune and Sunrise Conference London. Currently, he is working on a translation of the Gahar Rayana Kosha, which is Ghata Ratna Kosha, a Prakrit verse anthology from the 11th century. As he describes himself, he moonlights as a poet, and I personally know him to be a very good poet. I now request Preet Kona to introduce the subject matter of today's talk, and also request the speaker to begin his talk.
Thank you, sir. So, though largely forgotten today, Prakrit enjoyed high status as a literary language through Indian antiquity. In particular, the exquisite poetry of the Gaha Satasai has influenced generations of poets in multiple languages. The talk will use the background of choice verses drawn from classics to give an introduction to the world of Prakrit poetry. Some verses by more recent poets will also be presented. Over to you, Mr. Suhas, and I would request everybody if they could switch on the video. It would be a lively session, so even the speaker could see the audience. Thank you so much.
I thank all the organizers for the invitation, Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, Dr. Sangeeta Menon, and Meera Menon, and Preet Kona, and your entire team. As the great Sanskrit poet Rajashekhara noted over 1,000 years ago, that any contemporary poet is lucky if anybody at all wants to read his poetry. And I think the situation is the same for Prakrit as well, in particular. Pratyaksha kavi kavyam cha rupam cha kulayoshitaha gruhavaidyasya vidya cha kasmaichid yadi rochate. So I'm particularly pleased that I have been invited not just to speak about Prakrit, but also to present some of my verses, which I shall be doing. But before I start, let me just open in the traditional way with an invocatory verse. Somalakamal vilasiri sakkayavayane suparusa bandhe sum sarasa itakim jurasi payavayanam mimaha chitta. So Saraswati, you're very used to sitting on a very comfortable seat, that is a lotus, very soft and comfortable. But you still want to stay on the tongues of Sanskrit poets. You use harsh words like abhangshit, tiddhananchaya, and tarsnya, and all of that. So I suggest that instead you come to the mouths of Prakrit poets instead. That is right now me, where the words are soft and it's much more comfortable for you. So you can, there's a pun on va'ana, which can mean either vadana or vachana, mouth or words. So when we open a conversation about languages in ancient India, Sanskrit is naturally the first word that springs to anybody's mind. Of course, the story of Sanskrit is truly extraordinary. A language that was first spoken in some hamlets in Punjab, then grew to dominate the whole subcontinent and then overflowed to Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, and even beyond. And 2000 years ago, Panini wrote, or perhaps recited, his extraordinary grammar, which after that became the gold standard for all language since. However, of course, bedrooms, kitchens, markets do not recognize any such gold standards. Language will change despite all attempts to resist, and the masses will start using words in ways that grammarians never intended. So as one Sanskrit poet says, if not for the mouths of singers, dancers, astrologers, and other common folk, where else could ungrammatical words hide to escape from the grammarians on prowl? Vayakarana kiradad, apashabdam rugaha kvayanti santrastaha, jyotirnata vita gayaka bhishaganana gahvarani yadinasyu. So in this way, 2000 years of change has finally resulted in all of the languages that we are familiar with today in North India: Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati, Assamese, all of them ultimately descending in some way from Vedic Sanskrit. And of course, these two extremes are very familiar to us. We understand that there is Sanskrit on one side, Veda. There's a cliche that says that every PhD thesis from Banaras Hindu University starts with the phrase, Vedo mein kaha jata hai. So there's Veda on one side, and then of course there's Hindi and Gujarati and all of that on the other. But what came in between is not very clear to most, at least in the public eye. If prodded, most people might come up with Avadhi, Braj Bhasha, people might remember Tulsidas, but beyond that, it all seems like a blank. But of course, there were so many languages that came in between, Pratyabhignana turning into the Hindi Pehchan, or Yagnopavita turning into Janeyu, or Upadhyaya turning into Ojha, and then finally Jha. And all of these languages have been forgotten. Of course, some snippets have been preserved. And Prakrit is one of these languages that was not one of these, it was never a minor language. It never spent a brief existence confined within the four walls of the house, never adventuring into royal assemblies or scholar debates. For at least 1,500 years, Prakrit was cultivated throughout India. It could be the late literary theorist Anandavardhana in Kashmir, or down south, the great Sri Vaishnava Guru Vedanta Deshika in Tamil Nadu, or in the east, the Jain Acharya Hemachandra, or in Bengal, Abhinanda, the great author of Ramacharita, who praises the Satyasai. In Karnataka too, so we have Nemichandra, Pushpadanta, Devasena, and Swayambhu, the author of Paumacharyu, the Apabhramsha work. And certainly old Alaganada poets like Ranna and Pampa definitely knew Prakrit. There is no doubt in that. So this was a language that actually stretched across India, and it was not tied to any one sect or religion. So Hindus wrote in it, Buddhists wrote in it, Jains wrote in it. In Jains in particular, in fact, have nurtured Prakrit tremendously, since their agamas are all in Prakrit. So where Jains have gone, there almost as a rule, Prakrit has flourished. So as I recently wrote in an email to a Prakrit scholar as an opening, Muhapatta bandham anusasanto jinamaya anugo visakito pauva bhasa hinnuttisa bahumanam tumam na paripileyu. So the coronavirus must surely be a Jain, because he instructs everybody to wear a mask on the face. This is something that Shankar Rajaraman also wrote about. And because he's Jain, may he take pity on you, considering that you're a Prakrit scholar. So at least out of that respect, may coronavirus spare you. So there are poems of truly extraordinary beauty, and I'm not just saying this because I have been invited to talk on Prakrit, so I cannot not say that. But Gaha Satyasai, Setubandha, Leela Vai, Kuvalayamala, works like these have had tremendous influence on Sanskrit poets, and up to the modern day, still continues. And in fact, Akbar personally requested for the Setubandha, one of the classics, to be explained to him at his court. And it's really the Gaha Satyasai, which is here when you talk about Prakrit, that stands as the peak. One of the peaks of Indian literature, spanning across 3,000 years, across all languages. A couple of years ago, when I read the Gaha Satyasai through the medium of the Sanskrit Chaya, or the Sanskrit translation, I was so struck that I decided I have to learn this language just to read the Satyasai. And in hindsight, I can say that all those hours spent over grammar books and dictionaries, which for Prakrit are resources are very scarce, have definitely been more than worth it. This is truly extraordinary. So with this short introduction, we shall move on directly to get down and dirty with the language. So my intention today is to read as many verses as we can and deal with the Prakrit directly, instead of with descriptions of Prakrit or with the historical aspects of Prakrit, because those are things that you can always read in books and understand by yourself. I can mention some books at the end if anybody needs. But I choose to not speak about things like those, things like how many Prakrits exist, what does the word Prakrit mean, how are Prakrits used in Sanskrit drama, because I think more interesting is to actually hear the Prakrit and try to understand what the poets were saying. And that's something that is more difficult to grasp from books. So of course, the first question before we enter the world of Prakrit is, what does Prakrit sound like? So unlike Sanskrit, where Shiksha Shastra has defined the phonetics of Sanskrit to a very precise degree, with Prakrit we don't really know, but there are some clues to suggest that the sounds hadn't shifted. So what people wrote, what the script suggests is also what we pronounce. So a couple of years ago, somebody made a movie on Vedanta Deshika, who wrote a Prakrit work called Achyutashtakam, Achyuattam. And in that movie, they actually had a song in Prakrit, and from the Achyutashtakam, and it was meant to be sung. So Prakrit songs gathas are meant to be sung, and I shall just play that so you can hear how a gatha sounds.
தேவநாயகனை பிராகிருதத்தில் அனுபவித்ததை நாம் சிரவணித்ததில்லையே. நான் பாடினால் அது பாஷா லட்சணம் அன்று. கனகா,
முகச்சந்தமோளி திணரமச்ச ஹியோ துச்ச சிஹுர பாரந்தாரோ. முகச்சந்தமோளி திணரமச்ச ஹியோ துச்ச சிஹுர பாரந்தாரோ. அகடிய கடனா சத் सत्यं सत्यं ठावेदास सच्च समग्रम् अघडि अघडना सत्यं सत्यं ठावेदास सच्च समग्रम्.
So that is what a gatha sounds like. Gathas are what Prakrit verses are usually called. So here Vedanta Deshika is asked by somebody to recite his Achyutashtakam, and he says that no, Prakrit is best said by a woman because it's so soft and gentle and feminine. Which this is a trope that keeps coming back. I'll come to that. And then he asks his wife to sing it instead. And if you listen carefully, you can see that it has already started acquiring the quality that modern North Indian languages have. In particular, you can see that letters like tha and ja, majjhatiyo, tujja, chura, bhar, and dharo have started appearing. Tha and ja are very rare in Sanskrit, but they are so common in Hindi, and already that effect has started taking place. But still, it resembles Sanskrit very much so. So you can in fact explain this in Sanskrit almost like a gloss. So Muhachanda moli dina ara majja tujjatiyo majja tujjatiyo siura bharandharo dinakara mauli madhyasthitaha tava chikura bharandhakaraha. So you can see that it's very close. It's not very far. It's in fact as close as in modern Kannada you would have nanu manege hoguttene versus nan manege hogtini. So it's not further away than that, but it's still a distinct language for reasons that I will talk about later. And as you saw, Vedanta Deshika asks his wife to recite it. He says that this language is apt for recitation by a woman, and this is one of the things that Prakrit prides itself on how soft it is, because all of the harsh letters in Sanskrit have fallen away, leaving only the soft sounds. And Rajashekara in fact says that Parusa sakka abandho pau abandho vihoi sumaro purusa mahilana jetyam mihantaram tetyam imanam. So what the difference is between men and women, that's the same difference between Prakrit and Sanskrit. Men are harsh and women are soft. Parusha samskrita bandha prakruta bandhascha bhavati sukumara. And this keeps coming up again and again. Another poet says that may Sanskrit poetry and those who compose it burn. Dajjau sakka akavvam cha nimmiyam jena. Why? Because Sanskrit sounds apparently like a bamboo grove on fire, crackling and making all kinds of sounds, while Prakrit is very nice and serene. Another poet says that when somebody speaks to you in Prakrit, you mustn't reply to them in Sanskrit, because that's like throwing stones at a comfortable bed made of flowers. So these kinds of associations that Sanskrit Prakrit poets have made for themselves about the softness of Sanskrit Prakrit, and it's used quite commonly in plays where songs are typically Prakrit gathas, which are sung even in Sanskrit plays. So if you look at the whole of Prakrit literature, as I already mentioned, the peak there is the Gatha Saptashati, which it's a great tragedy that people don't talk about this more, because it was without doubt one of the most read works in India before pre-colonized India. So the verses are definitely still as fresh as they were 1,200 years ago in 200 AD when all of the verses were written. So the setting here is of rural Maharashtra, or Marahatta, as Prakrit calls it. And there is the Godavari, there's the Reva, the Tapi, the Vindhya. And it's like the poets are going around with a camera and taking snapshots of what's happening in the villages. So one might surreptitiously put a periscope into a house and see what the husband and the wife is doing, or into the fields, the sesame fields, the rivers, the countryside, and all of that. And then there are the farmers. The characters here are the farmers, the village headman, his son and daughter, the cowherds, the hunters. However, do not mistake this for simple folk songs. They're very, very far removed from that. There is a certain notion that Sanskrit is the language of the elite and Prakrit is actually the language of the common people and all of that. This is a very carefully cultivated image within Prakrit too, but it's not true. It's very far from being true. This poetry is extremely sophisticated. It follows very set literary conventions and tries to produce certain effects in the readers. So in fact, at the very start, Hala says, the compiler, about the compiler, it said that Sattasa aim ka ivachalena kodiya majha arammo halena viraiyaim salankarana gahanam. So King Hala selected out of a crore verses, some nice verses, 700 verses that he liked. And these were not just some verses that the poet sat down and decided, I'm feeling particularly romantic today, so I'm just going to write what I feel. These are salankara. These are carefully deliberated products of a tradition that has cultivated this sort of literary art for perhaps centuries. So the poets were without doubt educated and court poets. There were some poetesses too. We know some names like Reva, and there's one Andhra Lakshmi, probably South Indian, and then Madhavi, Anu Lakshmi, and many others. And some of them are kings. We now know from inscriptions that some of the poets there are actually other kings. And the theme of the entire poem is basically love poetry. That is what permeates the entire the world of Prakrit poetry. And as I will later explain, soon in some time, because of the influence of Satyasai, Prakrit becomes synonymous in some way with love poetry. Love is Prakrit and Prakrit is love. And you cannot know love without knowing Prakrit. And this theme continues in Prakrit poetry in many works. So I'll just skip ahead and move to start reading verses now. So Ghariniye Mahanasa Kammalaggamasi Yena Hathena Chattam Muham Hasijai Chandavatthanga Paina. So a woman in the village is sitting by the fire and cooking, and a bit of soot from the fire comes off and lands on her face. And then her husband laughs at her and says, "At last, your face now looks like the moon." So that means that her face was so spotless before that it didn't even have the mark that the moon had, the rabbit on the moon that the moon has. Then another snapshot from a house in a village. Paapayassa paino putthim putte samaruhantammi dadhamannu doomiyaivi haso ghariniye nikkanto. So these are all some of the big verses at the beginning of the Satyasai. So in Sanskrit and in Prakrit, if your lover is angry with you, then they say that the best way to make a woman rid a woman of her anger is to fall at her feet. And people in Sanskrit do this all the time. And the Kama Sutra too says that. It gives you the instruction that if your wife is angry with you, just fall at your feet. So the person in the poem has done something to upset his wife, and she's angry, and so he has fallen at her feet, but it's not working. And then what happens is that his little son, who's a toddler, thinks that his father is playing a game and climbs on his back for a ride while he's fallen at her feet. And that causes the mother to break into laughter, and then the fight ends. And while we are on the topic of this falling at the feet, Pada Patana, I can also quote another verse, which we know from Ajada's commentary on the Saraswati Kanthabharana to be the opening verse of the great Bruhat Katha or Vaddhakaha, which once formed a great triad with the Mahabharata and Ramayana, but which now is lost. But we know what the first verse is. It was Prakrit. Panamaha Panaya Pakuviya Gori Chana Lagganagga Padibimbam Dasasu Nahadappanesum Eyahara Tanuharam Ruddam. This is a Maharashtri Prakrit rendering of the original, which is in Paishachi. So Pranamata Pranaya Prakupita Gauri Charanagra Lagna Pratibimbam Dashasu Nakhadarpaneshu Ekadasha Tanuharam Rudram. So when Parvati is angry at Shiva, Shiva too falls at Parvati's feet to console her. And then when his reflection falls on her 10 bright glistening toenails, it makes it seem like Shiva has 11 heads. So this may seem a bit strange, I think, to most people unacquainted with Prakrit poetry, but things like this, dealing with reflections, especially in toenails and nails and things like that, are very popular with Prakrit poets, especially the concept of reflection. Sankamai, Sankramati, it keeps coming up again and again. And you can also see here that Eyaharatanu Haram. So it seems like Eyahara is Ekadasha, 11. And you can see that it's well on the way to becoming the Gyara that you see in Hindi. Egahara, Gyara is not very far away. Another one, Anna Mahila Pasangam Dedeva Karesu Majha Suha Assa Purisa Ikantarasa Nahi Dosa Une Viyananti. So a woman is praying to God, "Oh God, De Deva, Anna Mahila Pasangam Majha Suha Assa Karesu. Please make it so that my husband spends some more time with other women." Why? Because Purisha Ikantarasa Nahi Dosa Gune Viyananti. Because he doesn't realize what a catch I am. He needs to spend time with other women. Then he might know what a catch I really am. Then another one. Panaya Kuviyana Dunhavi Aliyapa Suttana Mana Illanam Nichala Niruddhani Sasa Dinna Kannana Komallo. So after a fight, wife and husband have gone to bed and they don't want to face each other because they're angry. So they have now turned away from each other and they're sleeping. And then the poet asks, Ko Mallo. So who is stronger amongst them? Who will be able to resist turning for the longer time? A Sanskrit poet takes this and he has a very nice, gives a very nice turn to this. He says that the husband and wife have now turned away from each other and they're sleeping. But in the wife's head, even after she falls asleep, the fight does not end. The fight still continues. So she continues the fight in her sleep. And then in her dream, again in anger, she turns to face away from him. And in that way, once again, they are both led to face each other. Then another very heart-touching verse from Satyasai. Samasokha dokha parivadhyana kalena rudha pemmanam mihuana marahi jamtam khujiyai iyaram muyam hoi. So after spending a lifetime together, sharing all the sorrows and happiness that comes by one's way, out of a couple, the one who dies is actually the one who lives, and the one who is left behind is actually the one who feels dead. Then a couple of verses on a beautiful woman describing her beauty. Jassa jahim chiya padhamam tissa angammi nivadiya ditti tassata im cheyathiya savvangam kena vina dittham. So this particular girl is so beautiful that nobody has been able to know her in all her beauty. And why is this so? Because the moment you look at her, where your eye first lands, there it's stuck. You can't move your gaze away from there. So nobody can actually see her in all of her beauty. You can only see her in the particular bit where your eye lands. Another one, tuhamuha saricham nalaha haitti sampunna mandalo vihina annama amvaghade yum punuva vikhandijjai mayanko. So the poet says that trying to make the moon as beautiful as your face, the creator breaks it apart every fortnight and then remolds it, but then fails and then keeps trying again and again. Datthunatiye aharam hayayi mandai lajjamana im bimbaphala im ubbandhanam vavalli virayanti. This is from Gatharatna Kosha, Gaharayana Kosa, not from Satyasai. So he's saying that looking at how pretty and red your lips are, the cherries have hung themselves from trees in desperation. There are Sanskrit poets who write verses that are similar to this, in the sense that one poet says that the moon, upset that he's not as beautiful as you are, has taken to the Ganga on top of Shiva's head, standing by the forest of his locks, and is growing thin day by day, doing tapas, asking for a boon that may I be as beautiful as her. And another poet imagines that lotuses in ponds are actually standing on one leg, praying to the gods that may I acquire the beauty of her face. And then another one, Eddahamettammi jaye sundara mahila sahassa bhariyevi anuharai navaritissa vamadham dahinadhassa. So this world is very large, Eddahamettammi jaye, and there are thousands of beautiful women. There's a beautiful woman on every street. But still, when it comes to her, this much is true, that the only comparison for her is that her right half is like her left half. Apart from that, there is nothing more that you can really say. So another one, this is very heart touching as well. This has no clever alankara or anything like that, but so it's a very nice snapshot from a house. Genhaha pulohaha imam pahasiya vayana pa issa appeyi jaya suyapadha mubhinna dantajuvalankiyam voram. So the husband has just come back to the house, and the wife thrusts a badara fruit into him, bore hannu as we say in Kannada, into his hand and say, look at this. And then he takes that and he looks at it, and then it has the tiny mark of his son's first teeth. And that's what she's showing to him. So all what you heard in Prakrit today are some of, in Kaha Satya Sahi, have become some of the recurring motifs of Prakrit. So even if you give somebody who knows Prakrit in Sanskrit garb, they will be able to recognize, I think, quite well that this is probably Prakrit. This was probably Prakrit to begin with. And there are many such motifs in Prakrit that are followed throughout Prakrit literature. And one of them, for instance, is about a class of people called Cheka or Chailla or Chappannaya. This is about clever people, certain clever people who are extremely good at social intercourse. So nothing escapes their attention. There is absolutely, particularly when it pertains to matters of the heart, you just can't fool them. So as one in Gaharayana Kosa, one girl complains, Usasiyampi munijjai chaillaha sankule game. The people in my village are so clever that I can't even breathe, let alone like a boy. They will definitely know. Even if I breathe, they somehow get to know what I'm up to. So this is a verse about one of these clever people, Chekas. And she says, Sahasitti jamna diktho, sarahasa chittena jamna alatto, uva aro jamnaka o tamchiya kaliyam chaillehim. So not wanting the Cheka to know that I like this boy, I did not look at him. I did not speak to him, nor did I help him in any way. But this wretched Cheka actually guessed what was going on just by the fact that I did not do that. So the negative evidence became evidence in that case. Then Ratte Ratta Kasinammi Kasinaya Majjiyammi Majjimaya Phalihamaniva Chailla Jathaga Tatharangilla. So these people who are very clever at dealing with people, Rakte Rakta. So where if you need to be red, they're red. If you need to be black, then they'll be black. And so they are like Sphatika-mani. So if a crystal gem, if you put it on a red surface, it becomes red. If you put it on a blue surface, it becomes blue. So in that way, these people, where they go, they manage to blend in there. And it says, Phalihamanivva chailla jathagaha tatha rangilla. So it's the precursor to the Hindi Rangila, you can see. So wherever they go, they manage to be Rangila. Another very concept associated with Prakrit is the concept of Dhvani. So the next verse that I will read could be a strong contender for the title of the best known Prakrit verse, even amongst people who know Sanskrit, thanks to Anandavardhana quoting it to illustrate the concept of suggestion or Dhvani. What this suggestion is, I will briefly tell after I read the verse. So Bhamadhammiya visatto sosuna o ajjamariyo tena gola ada vieda kudanga vasina dariyasi hena. So a woman goes to a pre-decided spot, which is quite lonely, to meet her lover, and they've already arranged for this. But due to a stroke of bad luck, there's a very innocent monk who's standing there plucking flowers or doing something like that. And naturally, this is spoiling her plans. So then what does she do? So she tells him this verse. She tells him that, "Oh monk, have no fear. Walk around, do whatever you want. The happy news is that the monkey, the dog that would bite at your heels has just this morning killed by a lion." So naturally, the monk is not going to stand there. Lions are more dangerous than dogs biting at your heels. So she's trying to tell the monk, outwardly the verse says, "I want you, you can stay here and do as you want." But really the suggestion to the monk is, you must run away. This is not the place for you. So this is dhvani or suggestion. And Prakrit verses have a lot of these. So far from being the language of the common folk, Prakrit verses actually pride themselves on being very clever and very difficult to understand. And not difficult to understand, but not everybody can grasp these verses. You need to have a certain amount of cleverness and aptitude in order to understand what they're saying. Another similar instance is a verse called Ethanimajjayatha, which is also quite famous. What happens there is that a traveler has come home, and the girl at home likes that traveler and she wants to spend the night with him. But of course, there are people at home. So when the traveler, so she tells the traveler, "Look, that's where my bed is. Be careful to not fall into it in case you wake up for some reason in the evening." So what she is really doing is pointing out where her bed is so that he can come there. So these are some verses from Satyasai and Gaharayana Koso that you just heard. So now that you heard these verses, I think one question that needs to be addressed is, how is Prakrit different from Sanskrit? Because a lot of people who read Sanskrit are usually accustomed to reading Sanskrit as Prakrit as Chaya, as a sort of a Sanskrit translation that's usually given below the Prakrit in Sanskrit place. And they usually ignore the Prakrit, treating it as just garbled Sanskrit. So is Prakrit just Sanskrit with syllables systematically changed? The answer here is that definitely not. Prakrit is not just garbled Sanskrit. And Sanskrit that has been mechanically transformed into Prakrit is immediately noticeable. Somebody who knows Prakrit well will be able to make out. And why so? And the answer is the literary conventions that make Prakrit instantly recognizable as Prakrit. So one is the motifs and the sphere in which Prakrit operates, that is a bit distinct from Sanskrit. And of course, also the features of the language itself. So for instance, Prakrit has its own set of preferred verbs and nouns. So Prakrit will preferentially use the verbs bhanai, bhanati, or jalpati, or even lapati for speech, while Sanskrit prefers other verbs. And there are Prakrit will prefer prekshate, pechai for seeing, while Sanskrit never uses that. And so there are these kinds of distinctions that need to be carefully cultivated by a Prakrit poet. And even beyond that, there are Prakrit idioms that repeat across works. So for instance, gune patati, gune padai means is beneficial in Prakrit. I don't think you see this in Sanskrit. And then there are constructions like nathaha ... taha, nayatha ... tatha, which are very popular for constructing verses in Prakrit. And then tana kim bhanima, what shall we say of that? That means there's really nothing that can be said. Also very popular. Tam namaha is a very popular way of opening a invocation, to a prayer to a god. Bow to him as a command. You don't see this in Sanskrit. Or rakha uo, may he protect you. Juttaminam, that's good. That's all right. Kimna pajjattam, is that not enough? Ka samasisi, what comparison can be there? There can be no comparison. Jahi kahava, if at all somehow. Divve parahutte, when fate turns against you. Hiya ye khudak khudai, it's like a dagger in my heart. So these kinds of phrases keep repeating in Prakrit and contribute to giving Prakrit the flavor of Prakrit. And those writing in Prakrit should really very consciously cultivate these idioms, I think, to give their verses a flavor distinct from Sanskrit. Otherwise, it just becomes a weak imitation of Sanskrit. Of course, there are a good number of Prakrit authors like Ramapanivada and Ghanashyama, all from the south, who ignore all of these idioms, and their works just sound like phonetically transformed Sanskrit. And even Sanskrit dramas often do not use any of these because the authors were probably not aware of Prakrit to the level desired. So in all, I think I would say that the language of the Satyasai, Vajjalagga, Leelavai, and the Muktakas found in various Alankara works are what should be taken as gold standard for people who want to write in Prakrit. Another very unique feature of Prakrit is that it affords the poet with some extraordinary opportunities for punning. So Sanskrit already takes punning to the level of a very refined art form, something sometimes frustratingly refined. And Prakrit can do, I think, almost everything that Sanskrit can do in terms of punning, but it can do more. And this is because Sanskrit words, multiple Sanskrit words collapse into one Prakrit word. So for instance, the Prakrit word Maya contains within it the Sanskrit words Mada, arrogance, Mruga, deer, Maya, and Mata. So all the 4 words are within the Prakrit word Maya. So you can imagine, and this happens for thousands of words. So you can only imagine the possibilities for punning that it opens up. So similarly, Ra'ana can be Radana, or it can be Ratna, or it can be Rachana. But thankfully, much to the relief of editors who edit Prakrit texts, this potential has not been, I think, usually abused by poets. So I'll share a few verses which show this punning. The first I'll talk about Abhanga Shlesha. So this is where words don't have to be split in order for the pun. So for instance, in English, if you look at the pun, I just went to an emotional wedding. Even the cake was in tears. Now there's a pun here on tears, which can be T-E-A-R-S or T-I-E-R-S. But there's no splitting involved. It's just that word tears, which means 2 things at once. So that is Abhanga Shlesha, and in Prakrit, some examples. So, Va'anam Purantara Anam, Ra'am Ja'anam Suvanna Mangam Te, Sancharimasi Sundari Manmata Bhandara Manjusha. So your Vadanam Spuranta Radanam. So your mouth has teeth. Your mouth has white, glistening, beautiful teeth. Or your mouth has glistening gems. Spuranta Ratnam. And then Suvarna Mangamte. So your body is golden, Suvarna, or has good letters, or is golden, or has a nice complexion. Sanchari Masi Sundari Manmata Bhandara Manjusha. You are like a traveling treasury. So there's a pun on Suvarna and Ra'ana here. And then another poet says, Tamnamaha Bhara Imji Echarananaha Dappanesu Sankanta Bahuvahana Hunti Pudam Panamanta Takkane Kaino. He says that as soon as poets bow to Saraswati, they immediately become Bahuvahana or Bahuvachana. So why? Because as we saw in the previous verse, when Shiva falls at Parvati's feet, his reflection in her toenails makes her have 11 heads. Similarly, when the poets bow at Saraswati's feet, they acquire multiple heads because of the reflection. So they're either Bahu Vadana, having many heads, or because because of her grace, they also become Bahu Vachana. They become good poets. So that's another kind of pun. And then if you want to talk about Sabhanga Shlesha, which is where you have to split the words, in order to see the pun. So for instance, I like eating seafood. I eat all the food that I see. So there the word seafood has to be split as sea plus food in order for the pun to be visible. So it's something like that. So a very good poet called Bappa Bhatti, from his Tarayana, he says, Taiyachi sihisihabha surena bhuvane harena akkante aharathane tua suhanu vasai niruvadamam anango. So we know that that Shiva burnt Cupid, Manmatha, when Manmatha tried to shoot Shiva with his arrows. So he says that the poet says that, beautiful girl, I think that that Manmatha has taken refuge in your lips because it is Aharatthana. So in one case it's Adharasthana, it's your lips. In the other case it's Aharasthana, the place which does not have Hara, Shiva. So because there is no Shiva on your lips, Aharatthana, Manmatha has gone there thinking that he is safe from Shiva's flames. And another poet says, Panaina deva dinto bahuso lakhai uttamo kisa padivakkhana vituhadin tigayavara rayana kodiyo. So he says, O king, this is praise of a king. He says, O king, why are you so proud that you give lakhs, that you give away lakhs in donations, that you're so rich? Even your enemies, even your enemies do the same. So, but the pun here is on Radhana Kodiyo, which on one it means Ratna Kotiyo, or it can mean Radhana Kotiyo. So the Radhana Kotiyo, the ends of the elephant's tusks. There's the pun on that. So in this way there are lots of puns that one encounters in Prakrit. And you constantly need to have a keen eye to be able to spot them when they appear, especially since most Prakrit works don't yet have translations or commentaries or anything like that. So you're usually all alone when you're reading them. Another verse, Prahelikas or riddles are also quite popular in Prakrit works, which you see from time to time. These riddles are absolutely inscrutable to the modern reader. They're usually so inscrutable that you might wonder how anybody could understand these or solve these at all. But I think if you were immersed in that environment and you thought in the same ways as they did, you probably could. Or if you read enough Prakrit poetry, you eventually develop that mentality. So to start with, I'll give you a simple one. Jaisa sahihi bhaniya tujjamuham punnachanda saricham takisa muddhadamuhi karena gandathalam phusai. So when her friends told the girl, your face looks like the moon, why did she wipe her face? The answer is because that means that there is a mark on her face. Maybe something got on her face because the moon has a mark on it. So she's more beautiful than the moon, but now if she's just as beautiful as the moon, then there's probably something on her face. Then the next one, Hantuna varagayandam vaho vahana majhayarammi dhuvaisaram piyai jalam tamjanaha kena kajjena. This one would have been absolutely impossible to understand if not for the commentator of Vajjalanga. So a hunter kills an elephant, and then after killing the elephant, very strangely, he takes the arrow out, he washes it in water, and then he drinks that water. And then the question is why? And then I will not give you any time to think about this because I don't think that anybody will be able to figure this out. The answer is that he wants to show that it was his own strength that killed the elephant and not a poisoned arrow. So he washed the arrow in water and then drank it to show that there was no poison. So it was all his strength alone and not poison. So I think I'll skip some verses because we have almost come to the end of the session. There's about 10 minutes left. So I'll just move straight to some verses by me, maybe 2 or 3, and then we can end. So some verses by me, I'll recite the first verse that I ever composed in Prakrit, which was in praise of Prakrit. Achau amiyam sagge sakkaya bhasa piyehi devehim vinnaha pauvanam takim amiyena amhanam. So tishtatu amrutam swarge samskrita bhasha priyaihi devaihi vijnata prakrutanam tatkim amrutena asmakam. So it says that let the gods keep their nectar. The ambrosia or nectar, amrita is after all of the gods. Let them keep it. We don't want it. Because the gods speak Prakrit there, speak Sanskrit. The gods speak Sanskrit, whereas we have Prakrit here on earth. So that is ambrosia by itself. So let them keep their ambrosia. We don't want it. Another one. Jalanana jahasamiro jagammi virahe Taheva Pimmanam Vijjava Ijava Lahunam Pajjalehiya Jai Garuvam. This says that wind is to fire as separation is to love. Viraha, separation, is to love. If whatever is small, it extinguishes that, but it only serves to make the great larger. Another one. Chajjiya piyuno ankam kuviyo ma'ai gantumichanto bhaggarambho rakhau arambham majjaherambha. This was a verse I wrote as the invocation for another talk that I gave. It's on Ganesha, which is that Ganesha is sitting on his father's lap or his parent's lap. And we know that when children are angry, if they're angry with one parent, they leave that parent's lap and they go to the other parent's lap to show their dissatisfaction. And Ganesha gets angry and wants to leave his father's lap and goes to his mother's lap. But then he realizes that his mother's lap is the father's lap because of the Ardhanarishwara form. So Ganesha's own effort has been ruined. And may that Ganesha protect my effort in whatever I'm doing. So that was the verse. And maybe I will end with one verse by Balram Shukla, who's one of the finest Sanskrit and Prakrit poets that we have today in Delhi. And he wrote a verse, Pekhanta Sappurisa Dhanna Pavammi Sakkaya Chayam Sirantam Mi Sarire Nicham Nichappa Tachamba. So only some few lucky souls, good men, can manage to see the Sanskrit hidden inside the Prakrit. Just like one can see the immortal soul that hides inside this body that's prone to decay. So it comes from the idea that Sanskrit is immortal and it's perfect, and Prakrit is really the worldly manifestation of that. So I think I will stop here since there is only 7 minutes left. And if anybody has any questions, I shall be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suhas. We are very, very, very happy to hear so much from you. It's not something that we are used to. It's very new to most of us. I'm sure there might be somebody who might also know Prakrit and know Sanskrit and might have been able to make the connections. But for some of us, at least, it is very new. And you gave a very comprehensive analysis of in a very interesting sort of fashion, especially the verses you recited. It kept us interesting. So thank you so much. And now we'll definitely take questions, suggestions, comments, whatever you have. You could either type it out or you could just raise your hands, and as and when I see it, ask you to speak up. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, we are very happy to listen to it. So we have got a lot of compliments for you, Suhas. A lot of people are saying it's very nice. There are people listening to this from Delhi, and they're very happy about your work. Your work is much appreciated. So Vaidyanathan has asked, where can one learn Prakrit? So
Learn Prakrit, I know that Healthy Institute in Delhi has some courses that they run from time to time. If you're in Delhi, maybe you can attend that. And I have heard that in Shravana Belagola, there's a Prakrit Research Center.
Yeah, it's there.
And maybe that as well. But I think if you know Sanskrit, then picking up Prakrit should not be too difficult. If you spend some time reading a Sanskrit drama, and you also spend some time looking at the Prakrit, and you spend some time memorizing some Prakrit verses, within no time you will be able to come to terms with it.
Okay. So we have another question, whether there are any Mahakavyas or works like Mahakavyas in Prakrit.
Yes, so there is probably the historically most influential one is called the Setubandha. It's a retelling of the Ramayana. which as I mentioned, Akbar specially asked to be explained in his whole. And it's a very good piece of poetry and has influenced Bharavi and Magha very, very clearly. And there are also others like Gaudavaho, definitely worth reading.
Okay. And another question that are there any spiritual or philosophical works in Prakrit? That is by Sharada Ji. So, ma'am, if any of you are here, you can ask your questions by yourself. Also,
spiritual or philosophical works, of course, in terms of the Jain tradition, it's full of spiritual and philosophical works.
Wish you could have told something from Jain, this thing, because we already familiar with.
In fact, a lot of what I read was from Jain authors. So, in fact, a lot of the verses I read were from the Gatha Ratna Kosha, which was compiled by Jineshwara Suri, who was a Jain monk. And even his status as a monk did not stop him from from collecting or writing these verses. Bappa Bhatti was also a Jain monk, but that did not stop him from writing.
So, Bhagyashree Trivedi has a question. Bhagyashree, are you here? Would you like to ask the question? Bhagyashree, are you here?
I can see the question.
Okay,
So
okay.
the question is there any connection?
I can ask my question just through the mic because I have low bandwidth, so I cannot switch on my video.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so my question is, it was a great talk. And I was wondering if there is any connection between the perception of Prakrit as a feminine language and, like you said, the dominance of love poetry as a theme. So is there some connection between femininity and love poetry?
Well, I haven't thought deeply about this, but at first glance, I would say no, because when you look at the old works like Gaha Satyasai, this notion of femininity is definitely not there. But the overwhelming association with love poetry is definitely there. At the very start, Satyasai starts by saying, if you don't know Prakrit and you still talk about love, then you're just a hypocrite. You can't do that. But there's no association with femininity, I think. I think that was probably a later development.
More questions. Indavara Gayatri, are there prose works in Prakrit, she asks?
Yes, definitely. There are lots of prose works in Prakrit. Probably, I would think the most important one is the Vasudeva Hindi, which is the Prakrit retelling of the lost Brihat Katha. Very old and archaic Prakrit and very nice to read as well. And there are also Champu works in Prakrit, which have a lot of prose. For instance, the Kuvalaya Mala Katha, very good Prakrit prose. And it's been influenced quite a lot by Sanskrit, so it manages to replicate the same kind of artistic prose that later Sanskrit prose has, like Banabhatta. Definitely worth reading as
well. Somebody with the acronym MKA has a question. Sir, would you like to ask it yourself?
Okay.
Just yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Good evening. I am professor in Sanskrit University in Delhi in India. And I am very happy if that you singing Prakrit verses, Prakrit poetry very well style, and I am giving you thanks, so many thanks, and I would like to know that what is the purpose of Jain writers, why they write in Prakrit in spite of Sanskrit?
Well, I would think that it's mostly a historical legacy. So because in the beginning they started off with using Ardhamagadi as the language. So I think often because of the dominance that Sanskrit has, we tend to forget that Sanskrit did not always enjoy the sort of overarching sovereignty that it now has.
Very good, very good.
So before the before 5th century or so, we see that all of the, before 350 AD actually, we see that inscriptions are mostly in Prakrit. We see Kannada plus Prakrit, Prakrit plus Tamil. So Sanskrit actually became so popular only after that. So Prakrit
Yeah,
was very popular before that, and Jains have
good.
continued that legacy while I think the others left off.
And not only in Ardhamagdi, but they write in Saur Seni also. Saur Seni Prakrit. There are so many, a big part of Jain literature is in Saur Seni Prakrit.
Yes, absolutely,
Ah,
absolutely.
thank you very much, but thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that question. And now we have MA asking what kind of influence did Prakrit have on Dravidian languages of South India?
So the influence obviously has been quite a lot. I can only speak in terms of influence on Kannada since I'm a Kannada native speaker. So we know that the old Kannada writers were all mostly Jain, so they definitely knew Sanskrit and Prakrit. So if you look at Dr. A.N. Upadhyay, who was one of the founding pillars of Prakrit studies of the last century and who was a Kannadiga himself, has written some articles on this. You can look at them, but there's a lot of influence on Prakrit from Kannada and Kannada from Prakrit. So, for instance, the word chikka in Kannada, which means small, is there in Prakrit. Has been attested in Prakrit. The word muddu in Kannada, affection, you will also find in Prakrit in some works. So there has been some exchange like that, and even in the Satyasai, the word tuppa appears, which means ghee. So there's the word tuppa. So you have words like this that appear, and I'm sure that, and even more common words like the word Uddha in Kannada comes through Prakrit from the Sanskrit Urdhva. So there have been a lot of influences, and what Upadhyay says is that once the Jains decided to cultivate Kannada as a language for their religion, they realized that it does not have the resources required to actually express themselves. So then they started borrowing Sanskrit, but they realized Sanskrit doesn't blend well with Kannada. So then they resorted to Prakrit. So this is what Upadhyay says.
Okay, thank you for that question and answer. Now we have Suma is asking whether there are any romantic verses you have composed, Suhas.
I think I did just read one of them out.
Yeah, you did, sure. So, and then we have Indavara Gayatri, ma'am, she is asking how are the prose works preserved and in which lipi? Are there any archives or such?
So they're all there are a lot of Prakrit works that have not yet been edited. And I think that burden falls upon all of us to do all of that. But the ones that have been published, mostly published in the Singhi Jain series from Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and the Prakrit text series. And if you look at these two series, I have uploaded the whole Singhi Jain series myself on archive.org. So if you look there, then you will find them all printed. And as for the Lipi, I think most of the Prakrit works today are sitting in Jain Bhandars somewhere in Gujarat and Rajasthan. There are also manuscripts lying in Tirupati, in Saraswati Mahal Library, and in South India as well, but majorly in, I would think, in Gujarat. So the Lipi is mostly what they call Jain Devanagari, if I understand correctly.
Okay, thank you. And we have a couple of questions about beginners courses, references, and all of that. So I think it would be easier for you if you can get in touch with them in person. So if it is okay with you, I can.
Yes, please
people
do.
Who want references and such.
Please do.
So apart from that, there is a question about ceremonial verses or festivals associated with Prakrit works and culture. It is by.
So when we speak about Prakrit culture, it's very difficult to know what that means because it was so long ago that Prakrit was dominant as a language, 1,800 years ago. So none of that really survives to know what was happening, but you can definitely get glimpses of this from the Satyasai, which is the old remaining work. So for instance, you have a mention of Ganesha there. So you know that Ganesha was, people would worship Ganesha. There's a mention of Radha. Actually, the first mention of Radha ever, I think, comes from the Satyasai. So you get some glimpses of festivals versus and ceremonies from that. But apart from that, I think it's all clouded by mist mostly.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Suhas. We've got, oh, yeah, I think you have answered almost all the questions. If there are any more questions, please feel free to write to him. I'm sure we will be able to share his email ID or something with you. So thank you so much, Suhas. It was definitely a very intriguing session. It was, we all definitely enjoyed it. So now just Shankar sir to like give a summary and help us understand a little more about what Suhas already so beautifully spoke to us about. So Shankar sir.
So thanks a lot, Suhas, for this Kannapeyusa, the nectar to ears. You began with a very beautiful Prakrit benediction to Saraswati, then traced the growth of Prakrit as forming a bridge between the Vedic Sanskrit and the modern Indian vernaculars. You stressed on the contribution of Jains to Prakrit literature. You made us hear a gaha from the Achyuta Shataka. That's Achyuasa, not Achyutashtaka. So made us hear a gaha from Vedanta Deshika's Achyuta Shataka. You contrasted between the softness of Prakrit, the Sukumaratva of Prakrit versus the Kathoratva, Rukshatva of Samskrita. You also spoke on the sophistication of Prakrit poetry. It's not as simple as people would think it to be. It's surely very sophisticated and has its own literary conventions. You also spoke about the close relationship between Prakrita and Sringara Rasa and quoted several verses in support of this. Your verses were basically taken from Gaha Satasai as well as Gaha Raina Kosa. You also gave a verse which is Dhvani Garbhita, which is full of suggestion. And finally, you spoke on the capacity of punning, the enhanced capacity of punning in Prakrita, and how, in spite of this possibility, the Prakrit poets have not misused Shlesha, the Alankar of punning. And finally, thank you for patiently answering all the questions of the Shrotrus. There are several questions and you answered them very patiently and very appropriately. Thanks a lot, Suhas.
Thank you. Thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shankar sir. Now I request Preet to give a formal vote of thanks to Suhas and everybody who's here.
Thank you, Meera. So on behalf of Team Kavya Lab and NIA CSP, I would like to convey a gratitude to Mr. Suhas Mahesh for giving this insightful talk for our Kavya Lab Vaishishtya series and taking us on a time travel into a bygone era and introducing us to this beautiful world of Prakrit poetry. We thank you, Mr. Suhas, and I would like to thank Professor Sangeeta Menon, the Dean of Humanities, the National Institute of Advanced Studies, for a constant love and support. And I would request interested participants to share their work with us for the upcoming Kavya Lab Vaividya sessions. And our next session is Kavya Lab Vaividya on the 28th with a lineup of wonderful poets sharing their work with us, and looking forward to see you all there. Thank you so much, one and all.
Thank you. Thank you.